Andrew Jackson, and the Battle of New Orleans. I wanted to go in order. I wanted to do something that had impact that doesn't get enough attention. So I thought the War of 1812 was perfect. George Bush was able to tour me through the White House. And again, I don't know how I got as lucky as I did. I think he's an unbelievable person who's going to be looked at as a much better president than anyone realizes. I think his book was written as decision points for a reason. During his time, whoever was president was going to have some of the toughest decisions of generations. And he said, I got the best people. I did the best I could. These are the decisions I made. And I don't think I would have changed any, so let's make them together. If you go to his library, you touch, you see the situations, you see the facts, you make the decisions with him. So, and he's a humble guy with great humility, and that's where the rubber hits the road. When President Trump insults President Bush, I have no patience for it, because I just think he's a great guy. And I think he did a really good job. And again, he had to rotate people out to get it right. So he brings me through the bowling alley, and he shows me the archway in the White House that still exists when the British burned the White House to the ground. And he says, I like to think that it's left up there for all presidents so they know how fragile democracy is and how close we came to total annihilation. How many people remember discussing the War of 1812 in social studies or history? We had like a day. Oh, it was a draw. A lot of people thought it was an unnecessary war. Read about it, study it. Not only was it necessary, there's a reason why we haven't been invaded since. We tried it with the wrong generals. When this backwoods guy from the Carolinas named Andrew Jackson put his hand up and said, I got a 1,200-man militia, I wanted to pay the British back. They've had this coming to them 29 years after the Revolution. They said, okay, Mr. Jackson, go back to being a lawyer and a judge and an attorney general and a congressman and a senator. I know about your circumstances and how your brothers were killed and your mom died during the war and your dad died before he was born, but you're just a little wild. We have our experienced generals. We had the wrong generals. All we had was a lack of success. And so divided were we. There was a Hartford Convention where the northern states said to send messages to Britain, if you don't invade, we're probably not going to fight. They got together. They were going to James Madison to say, basically, we're going to secede. For those of you who think the world is coming apart because President Obama was president for 8 years or President Trump has been president for 2, understand where we're from, what we got through, and how we succeeded. We got through it in miraculous ways, because we were supposed to go through these tough times to become a better nation, and there's a reason why we survived, because I don't believe this planet looks the same without us, and personally, we have done more to affect positively to more people throughout generations of time than any country in the history of man. But things looked dire for a while. So they always told me, you don't have to fight that war in New Orleans. The Treaty of Ghent was signed, but it was a great win. Well, when I went to Kuwait, I was put in with the 3rd Infantry, 2nd Division, and the 1st Division. They called themselves the Cotton Ballers. So I said, why? Is that the Battle of New Orleans? Oh, yeah. And they tell the story, and I did this foolish thing of saying, yeah, that's the battle we didn't have to fight. And these guys let me have it. Oh, really? Didn't have to fight? Do you know the circumstances? So that left a seed in my mind before I was even thinking about writing a history book. So I was with the guys that were with the guys that won the war, that won the battle, that sent the message that we would take on the finest infantry in the world, the group, the nucleus of which just defeated Napoleon, and we beat him in 45 minutes. Now, how did that happen? Before I go through it piece by piece and say, well, honey, I don't need this book anymore, we can hand it off. I thought, because that's the book you have, I thought that I'd take a look and we look at this piece together. This aired on Fox and Friends, hasn't been seen since. So here is with the paperback. With the paperback, I put in perspectives of what other presidents thought of this president, because Andrew Jackson became so controversial because Donald Trump happened to win the presidency and has so many similarities to Jackson. Next thing you know, I'm debating Donald Trump and Andrew Jackson as president, and I was just talking about a 41-year-old suffering from dysentery that was a self-taught military leader that became the most famous man in America and eventually the president. So I said, in this one, I'm going to tell you what Teddy Roosevelt, FDR, what Harry Truman and Abraham Lincoln and Ronald Reagan thought of Jackson. So before you take him off the 20 or a statue down in New Orleans, I wanted to tell you, 14 presidents visited the Hermitage, not because they were lost, because they studied him. And 5 said he was the finest president we ever had, and they were Democrats and Republicans. All right? So if we're going to have an arrogant generation that's going to reevaluate Andrew Jackson because he wasn't perfect and no one said he was, I think you should put it in perspective. If you ask Jackson what was key to his victory, he would say the Ursuline nuns. So when he gets into town, the story of the Ursuline nuns, they came in 1734. They were commissioned to, get this, empower women in this region, in this new world, America. They wanted to show women how to be leaders and how to take charge and how to survive in the outback. And they sent a convent. They formed a convent. They sent a mission, and the Ursuline nuns took root. But as the French and Spanish and later the Americans through the Louisiana Purchase, they became controlled to the best they can under the auspices of America. And Thomas Jefferson visited and said, hi ladies, just want you to know, as long as America's America, you could stay. And he said, great. And they heard how the British were terrorizing the Atlantic seaboard. They worried because the British were going to invade. This is the finest fighting force. America was getting pummeled in this war. Would they be safe? Well, when Jackson gets to town, he's got to win over the townsmen, many of which were just control of Spain, Cajuns. They were from the islands. They didn't even know he was going to have loyal Americans there because the purchase was just done a few years ago, 7 years prior. So we went to visit the nuns, and the nuns said, we love being Americans. Would you preserve us if you win? He said, yes. He goes, great. Then I'm going to pray for your victory. And we're going to take the second half of the convent, and we're going to make it a hospital. So Jackson said, with that, how can I lose? He truly believed that. If you don't believe it, 25 years later, when it was time to commemorate the winning of the war, Jackson, who was not doing well at that time, he had to go visit one place. He didn't go to the battlefield. He visited the convent to thank them, and they recorded that. And every January 8th since 1815, they come out of that convent and they ring bells in salute of Andrew Jackson and the miraculous victory that took place. Now, maybe I should put it in perspective. Jackson didn't say, I'm going to build a wall and fill it up with water. The British had the land in the exact wrong place. These pirates, who were essentially mobsters, wanted to side with us. They like the Americans. We attract the mobsters. And they was able to say, hey, listen, if you can get them somehow to land in this area where there's high grass and high weeds, this is the perfect place, because that means they got to go through you to get to New Orleans. And the British do. They disembark with their bright red coats, expecting to march right to New Orleans and actually spend Christmas on Bourbon Street. It was party town even then. So as they land, they can't get their boats close. They got to row their way in. Guess what we have? Flatboats with cannons. So as they land, expecting to waltz into New Orleans and put up with militia who tend to run instead of fight, they don't know they got to deal with Jackson. Out come the flatboats, and as soon as they land, half of them, they start getting bombed. Cannonball after cannonball. And then night falls, and Jackson makes a statement. Our enemy is on our coast and threatens invasion, but is equally true with Union energy and approval from heavens, we will beat them at every point. By the eternal, they should not sleep on our soil. The British are below, we fight them tonight. And they go in with hatchets and axes. And I read Captain Gleig, who became an esteemed officer at the time, was fighting his way up the ranks on the British side. They said it was the most brutal fighting he was ever a part of. Can you imagine the courage it takes to go into the teeth of an infantry with nothing but an axe, a gun that was useless because you couldn't see in front of you? And they were chopping them up, and then Jackson pulled them out and said, message sent. As they were healing their wounds, they start disembarking, and then come the cannonballs again. Jackson says, wait a second. They're landing here. New Orleans is here. He calls on the town to grab shovels, and together they start redigging the Rodriguez Canal. They fill it up with water. They start making a wall. This is women, children, Cherokee Indians, Choctaw Indians, all coming together. So the British have one way to fight. It's straight ahead. And we have better shots. We have a better strategy. We've got better generals. Now, Admiral Packenham lands. General Packenham lands. He looks around. He was late because they killed Admiral Ross in the Battle of Baltimore. Ross burned Washington. We killed him in Baltimore. So they need a new commander. Packenham comes. Now, they wanted Wellington. Wellington's quote was, I don't really want to fight over there. I don't promise myself much success fighting Americans. What did he know? But he sent his guys and his brother-in-law. It's true. So Packenham leaves. He goes, what did you do? We're boxed in. So these other guys looking to prove themselves, hey, if you don't have the courage to fight, go ahead, get back on your boat, go home. Of course, he goes, I'll figure it out. So he goes to move up, goes to move forward, gets repelled. Move forward, gets repelled. Guys start dying. Our guys aren't. So he says, I have an idea. We'll go up the Mississippi, and when we go to fight on January 8th, we'll go up the Mississippi, we'll come around the berm, we'll shock them. Great idea. except for they didn't take into account the wind and the current. The boats go in the water, they go backwards. The fighting starts, there's no one covered up the flank. And they end up getting mowed down. I'm going to throw some numbers at you. 100% accurate. We have 5,000 guys, they have 9,000. We lose 13. 13! They lose 291. We wound 1,262. We have 39 wounded, 19 missing, 484 missing, blown apart. But the best thing we do, we kill their officers. 3 generals, 7 colonels, 75 officers, dead. When they go to surrender, Jackson keeps sending this guy Lambert back. He says, send me your senior officer. Finally he says, will you tell him I am it, you killed the others? Jackson holds on to him. He wins the battle. Word gets out, the Treaty of Ghent is signed. Then word gets back to Washington that we won. We beat the finest infantry in the world in 45 minutes to defeat Napoleon. Now, if you think this is Brian Kilmeade, the Fox guy who just sings red, white, and blue, the message was sent to the world. And Jefferson said it was the most powerful message ever sent. We will not be invaded. We're not going anywhere. Get used to us. We would never be invaded again. So when Jackson was asked, the Treaty of Ghent was signed, you didn't really have to fight that. Here's what Jackson said 25 years later. If General Pakenham and his 10,000 matchless veterans could have annihilated my little army, he would have captured New Orleans, sentryed all the contiguous territory. Through a technicality, the war was over. Great Britain would have immediately abrogated the Treaty of Ghent and would have ignored Jefferson's transaction with Napoleon. Turns out they were going to what was the World Court then, trying to say Napoleon had no right to sell us the Louisiana Territory. They were going to reverse the whole thing and stop us from going past the Mississippi. If you don't think it's true, 8 years ago, Ron Drez, a decorated Marine and esteemed historian, who you'll know more about, now working with Martha McCallum on her book, 8 years ago he found paperwork showing that General Pakenham was told, if you hear any word of a ceasefire or a treaty, ignore it and stay. If you don't think the British stick around, tell that to India. Tell that to Hong Kong. They're still in the islands. They were going to stick around. They feared what we'd become. Which farewell address from Jackson, I thought was what I wanted to share with you, and I'm going to be taking questions about everything from Donald Trump on down. He says, I thank God that my life has been spent in a land of liberty, that he has given me a heart to love my country with the affection of a son, and a son to his country, and a father to his people. When he finally passes away, just shy of 80 years old, there was a statue dedicated 5 years later. And in that statue, Stephen Douglas was asked to do the dedication. And here's what he said. When Jackson died, there was a sense of completion, that the race had been finished. He felt his work is done, his mission fulfilled. And there was, for a moment, unanimous tribute. All felt there was a great man had fallen, yet there was a consolation in the consciousness that the luster of his name, the fame of his great deeds, and the result of his patriotic services would be preserved through time, a rich inheritance to the devotees of freedom. So we put him on the 20. We made a statue in Washington. We put it in front of the White House. We put a statue in New Orleans. And what are we doing now? Trying to take him off the 20. People are saying we have to have guards and security around a statue in Washington, and there's a group out there trying to take him out of New Orleans. There would be no American New Orleans without Jackson. Thankfully, people are sobering up. They're not touching the statue in New Orleans, so there is some pushback. And I think with the people in this room and colleges like this and universities like this that are going to push back, whatever's going on in public school, there'll be more private institutions. They're going to push people other ways because I think there's too many people who get it, that America's a wonderful place but not a perfect place. But the thing that makes what's great about us is we're trying to be perfect. How great is that? We're trying to be perfect in our house. We're trying to be better parents. We're trying to be better coaches. We're trying to be better teachers. We're trying to be better anchors. We're trying to be better grocery store workers or insurance agents. We're always trying to get better. We don't want success for us. We want the opportunity to achieve it. We want to pursue happiness. We don't want it guaranteed. Just roll out the ball and let us play. That's all we ask for. So by telling these stories and bringing it forward, I think we can reattach to our roots to find out how we got here and why should we have pride. We should have pride to be here. Whether you're a first generation or you came over in the Mayflower, this is part of your legacy. Embrace it. Warts and all. We never said the people on statues are perfect, but man, they were significant. We don't have to judge them, we could study them. And that's what I'm trying to relay here.